Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. We often wonder, what the heck could Warner Brothers be thinking with their DC Cinematic Universe? What could they possibly be thinking? And yesterday, Kevin Smith presented a theory as to what they're thinking, which I not only think is plausible, but I think is a good idea. So good that it could totally change the way we view the DC Cinematic Universe that Warner Brothers is building. And maybe, just maybe, they are on the right track. So I like it for two reasons, but first let me share Smith's theory. Yesterday, he said that maybe it's not that DC is trying to, copy Marvel's formula for their superhero movies, but, and that's where you have Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, all go off into their own solo adventures, trilogies, and then they occasionally come together for the big group film. Well, Smith said he thinks that what DC is doing is only making the group films. There will be no solo Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman films. You will only have Justice League films, and it'll be telling a huge story that needs to happen in multiple movies. And I think it'll be almost like a comic book, where there's, of course, the smaller story arcs that are one issues sometimes. Well, in this case, it would be one issue, because you can't have a movie where nothing gets resolved. But you have your smaller storyline, but then you have your overarching storyline, which carries over multiple issues and you're building to over a long period of time. So that's what DC would be building with their movies, which would be fascinating, because instead of having solo adventures for the heroes, individually, you'd be having smaller adventures that lead up to the big adventure. That would be what would make certain films more important than others in the DC Cinematic Universe. And that would be the scope of the story, or we've been building to this for a very long time. It's almost as if Ultron had been introduced, let's say, if Marvel was going to do this, he'd be introduced in the first Avengers film, and you slowly saw hints as to what was going wrong with him as the films progressed. So I think it's a fascinating idea, and as I said, there are two reasons I like it. First, let's approach it from the story angle, because that's where we are right now. Often, many of us, when we watch the Marvel movies, we don't understand that once the cat's out of the bag, once the team has been formed, once you have the Avengers, how do they not help each other out when there are huge stakes? For instance, Iron Man 3, the president's life is in danger. That's not worth Thor or Captain America's time. Tony Stark has to handle it all on its own. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, of course, Marvel had originally planned to have lots of cameos, and they signed their actors to huge numbers of films, and probably thinking, we'll never use them for 10 films, but now, of course, Marvel has planned all the way through 2028, so they're probably deciding that even with the multiple film contracts, that when they utilize a character is very important. And so the other thing is when you take that from a business perspective. So let's look at the contracts. So we have the story. So that's one reason. Story. All the characters will always be there. You don't have to make an excuse for why one hero has to take care of things for themselves. Now, from a contract point of view for the actors, Marvel, being a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a huge time commitment. You have to make your own solo movie, and then you have to be in the big film, the Avengers crossover film, and then you have to do a lot of publicity. Now, with the DC films, if everybody's in every movie, that means everybody has a smaller role, which means you can go and make the film, and then go and pursue other projects. So they can have maybe cast a little wider net, pun not intended but delightful, in their casting process. Maybe Ben Affleck can do this, although the first one apparently is very difficult to do, because we've seen that story that a film that Ben Affleck wanted to make had to be pushed back because Batman v Superman's taking so long. But in the long run, he would be able to pursue other projects while still being Batman. It wouldn't take up his entire career, which I think has kept some people from getting into the superhero game. So actually there are three reasons. So the first is the story. The second is availability of actors and the commitment required to be part of this. Now, the third reason I like this is that it doesn't make them compete with Marvel directly. I'm sure that Warner Brothers and DC are sick and tired of hearing, well, Marvel does it this way, and when Marvel does it that way, it works really well. And this is how I like it when Marvel does it. I'm sure they're like, we have got to get ourselves out of this arena. We have to create our own area, and maybe for once have people say, well, wouldn't it be great if the Avengers were in every movie? So perhaps that's what they're doing here. And I think it's very clever. And as many people have said, they're so far behind at this point that I just don't think that DC and Warner Brothers can build the infrastructure that Marvel has, all those separate solo films, which, you could arguably say are hindering them a little bit at this point. Although Captain America: The Winter Soldier was so good, but some people were unhappy with the way, Iron Man 3 turned out. I mean, would you like to have every movie be an Avenger movie, or do you like the solo adventures? That's also a very comic book, way to handle things. There's the group title, and then there are the solo titles, and it doesn't really seem to bother us as much when a character has to handle a big problem by themselves in their solo adventure on the page. But in the movies, you're wondering, where is that person? So the three reasons again are story. It's great not to have to wonder where all the characters are. 2 is the availability of actors and who you can get, because it's less of a commitment. And the third reason is not having to directly compete with Marvel, having a different infrastructure, a different style of the storytelling, so that they really can be their own entity. And also this allows them to, I think, catch up to Marvel, but without being a copycat. It's something unique. They're just going to make Justice League movies. I'd feel a lot better about this if I felt it was going to be like the Justice League animated series from Paul Dini and Bruce Timm. I don't want this to be like the Justice League we've seen in the New 52. I haven't liked that in any incarnation. I haven't liked it on the page. I haven't liked it as an animated movie. And I just continue not to like the comic. I don't even read it anymore. So I'd be very nervous if that's what we got in the films. But Justice League stories can be done very well, and I urge you, if you're not familiar with them, to go back, read the ones from before the New 52. Watch the animated series. Grant Morrison wrote some great Justice League stories. They can be very well done. And if they can do it to that degree and only make those kind of group movies where I always get Batman and Superman working together and Wonder Woman, I think that would be phenomenal. Now, some of you might say they've been teasing a Wonder Woman solo movie, but that's not official yet. And so you might be seeing a situation where, sure, they tested the waters, or one producer said, oh yeah, we're thinking about it, but it wasn't official, and they might actually now at this point have been moving towards this new idea, which I think I'd go for it if I were them. I think it's a great idea. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story, it's kind of movie related. I guess in that Drew Goddard dropped his Sinister Six commitment. He's still on board, I think, as an executive producer, but he dropped out of that project to pursue the Sinister Six movie. Movie, I guess, to some degree still beats television, even when it's on Netflix and it's from Marvel. So that's been in the news. A lot of you asked me to talk about that. But then the other thing that broke late last night, actually, is that they've cast their Daredevil, Charlie Cox. I'm a big fan of Charlie Cox. I think, I'm not familiar with his work in Stardust. I never saw that film. But I really liked him on Boardwalk Empire, which is where apparently he's gotten a lot of his current heat. Everybody liked him on Boardwalk Empire. He was very good on the show. And apparently CBS had him in 2 pilots, but they didn't get picked up for series. So he's been flirting with the lead role on a television series for some time now, ever since he ended his run on Boardwalk Empire. Again, very good on that show. I recommend you check him out. Also, he plays an Irish character, and of course Matt Murdock, as an Irish descendant, in Hell's Kitchen of New York City. So he has that background, and he was very, again, I can't say enough good things about Charlie Cox in his work on Boardwalk Empire. And the reason I'm praising him so highly there is that I think he's miscast in this role as Matt Murdock. Matt Murdock's father, if you may or may not be aware, was a boxer, and he didn't want his son to follow that path in life. And I think that's what put Matt Murdock on the path to becoming a lawyer. I think vengeance for what happened to his father, and this opportunity that presented itself through this accident that gave him his superpowers led to the superhero angle. But he wanted to be a lawyer to fight a different kind of fight than his father fought. And I feel that I always got the impression, based on the way that Matt Murdock has been depicted visually throughout the entire run of the character's career. He always has seemed a slight build, red hair, more like Donald Gleason, who unfortunately is in the Star Wars films. He can't be Matt Murdock, but I think that's a better choice. That's the look you're going for here. And I think Michael C. Hall was a character that they were considering, an actor, and I think he would have been a better choice for Matt Murdock. A little bit of a stockier build, but still, I feel that Charlie Cox doesn't look like the kind of kid that a father has to protect. He looks like he would grow up to be a boxer. With all due respect, I'm sure he can pull off the legal scenes, but he doesn't have the vulnerability that I think a young Matt Murdock had, why he was unpopular, why he was made to study in his room, why his father wanted to protect him, which did a lot to shape Matt Murdock's personality. Also, the whole idea of wanting to stick up for the little guy. That's all a big part. And, I think that Charlie Cox is more on the lines of the Daredevil casting with Ben Affleck, which was also a mistake. I mean, Ben Affleck really wanted to be a superhero. That's why he took the role. But I think that, so I can understand that and I'm sympathetic to it. But again, he just wasn't Matt Murdock. And sometimes an actor, no matter how good they are, there's just nothing they can do. They simply are not that character. Now, some people might say, oh, well, you could always change it up. But as I said, I feel that the slightness to Matt Murdock, the studious look is so integral to his personality that I don't think you can lose it. I don't see Charlie Cox in this role. I hope I'm pleasantly surprised, but I think he's not great casting. This has been a rough week for Marvel with the Edgar Wright news at the end, kicking him off of Ant-Man, and the fact that it might be the first disagreement between Kevin Feige and the Disney suits. That's very troubling. Then I think you have this miscasting with Charlie Cox, which I hope I'm wrong about. And then of course you have Drew Goddard, who I think was a very interesting choice, although I think he's much better suited to the Sinister Six gig because of his work on Cabin in the Woods. I think he's a much better choice there, and if I were Drew Goddard, or I knew Drew Goddard, I would advise him to do the same. And he simply can't do both. I'm surprised that Sinister Six is moving forward so aggressively after Amazing Spider-Man had some problems. You would think maybe they'd want to step back and rethink it a little bit, but at the end of the day, one of the problems with Amazing Spider-Man 2 was that it was so a coming attraction for the Sinister Six movie. They might as well just go ahead and deliver on that because I think that's going to be a good movie. I think that the Amazing Spider-Man 2 failed because it was too focused on another property, but that doesn't mean the properties that other property isn't going to be good. So I still have high hopes for the Sinister Six movie, and I think good luck, Godspeed to Drew Goddard, even though he left Netflix in the dust. Netflix Marvel for Daredevil. But so that's my feeling. I feel this show is coming together in a medium way, and I forget the name of the person they took on to take over for Drew Goddard, but much less caliber, much less experience, more television-y, more networky. And I think what was exciting about Drew Goddard is he brought that cinematic experience from Cabin in the Woods. I mean, of course, Drew Goddard has other, he's not a total film persona at this point, but he had that experience, and I think he would have elevated the material a little bit. I get worried about the material being downgraded now. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story is that apparently there's this Johnny Depp Houdini movie. The trades are arguing about how much of a breaking news story it is. It's always funny. The Hollywood trades are extremely competitive, and so they're always trying to scoop each other. And then this was funny because the Hollywood Reporter apparently scooped the story that Johnny Depp was in talks for this Houdini movie, and then Deadline came out and said, "Oh, that wasn't a scoop. We knew about that in January. That's a fake scoop." So it was another interesting layer to entertainment news. But anyway, I still think this sounds like a good idea, so I wanted to discuss it today. Johnny Depp is thinking of playing another zany role, and this would be very similar to what Robert Downey Jr. does, I think, with Sherlock Holmes. And this would be Johnny Depp as Houdini, but it wouldn't be a serious biography about the magician. It would be him as an Indiana Jones-type adventurer who apparently investigates the occult. Little John Constantine there as well. Interesting choices. I think this is a pretty good idea for Johnny Depp. I think it would be a good role for him, and as long as it's cinematic and doesn't go the way of The Sorcerer's Apprentice with Nicolas Cage trying to kind of play the same role, I think it could be pretty good. Also, this would be from Lionsgate, and of course their subsidiary, they bought Summit Entertainment, of course. They put out Now You See Me. I think it was not 2 summers ago at this point, maybe. And Now You See Me was maybe last summer. Yes, last summer I think. And Now You See Me was a very successful film. They're working on a sequel, although I think that's probably delayed because Jesse Eisenberg is Lex Luthor now. I don't know how available that he is. And of course you have Mark Ruffalo with all his Avengers work and his role being much bigger in the Avengers 2 Age of Ultron. But anyway, Now You See Me was a very successful and profitable film for the studio. So it makes sense. They'd be like, well, what else can we do with magic? People seem to enjoy it. And I think I have some concern that audiences might feel that they don't want to see any more Johnny Depp, so I wanted to ask you that question as well with this story. Can Johnny Depp be redeemed? I mean, I thought he did a nice job in Transcendence. The movie wasn't good, but Johnny Depp didn't just come and collect his paycheck. He committed and played the role, and I respected that. It made me think a little bit better of him. And I liked his work as Tonto, by the way, in The Lone Ranger. I thought The Lone Ranger also had problems, but again, it wasn't Johnny Depp's fault. So I would like to see him in this role. I think it sounds like a really great movie. My only concern is the director that they are working with, and that's Dean Parisot. And I actually interviewed him. He's a very nice guy. I interviewed him for Red 2. I will put that interview link at the end of this video. And he was really great, and I think he's a great comedic director. I thought Red 2 was a step up from the first Red film because of his involvement. I loved Fun with Dick and Jane. Really underappreciated film with Jim Carrey and Tia Leone. I recommend you stream it, rent it, whatever. And also he did, of course, Galaxy Quest, a classic sci-fi comedy. So Dean Parisot is a very talented director, but in comedy. And I feel that a Houdini movie, especially with Johnny Depp, Johnny Depp will focus on the comedy and, bringing that kind of twist to the film. I think they need someone who can bring the great set design, the action-adventure pieces, and Red 2 did have some good action sequences, but I feel that you don't want you don't want this Houdini to seem TV-like. And I think that's getting to be a thinner and thinner line these days as television elevates itself in terms of quality. So with all due respect to Dean Parisot, I think he's a great director, but I think just like Charlie Cox with Daredevil, he's wrong for this gig. All right, so I'm curious what you guys think. Would you see that movie? Do you like the idea of Houdini as an adventurer and a studier of the occult? Or are you like, hey, come on, leave John Constantine alone. He finally got a TV show. Although, I also think it's funny that Johnny Depp has been long rumored to play Doctor Strange, and it looks like he just made his own Doctor Strange. I think that's great. All right, so let's go to the viewer question. This isn't a specific question. This is actually kind of a continuation of Movie Math yesterday, where a lot of you were wondering, why isn't 90 million enough for X-Men? Why isn't that considered a great number? Why am I making such a big deal about crossing the 100 million mark? Well, the one reason I did, and I still feel very strongly that this is the big story, the first thing is that all the trades are saying, who's going to hit 100? This movie's going to hit 100. This movie's going to hit 100. They've done it for every single movie. They said that Captain America was going to hit 100. They said Spider-Man 2 was going to hit 100. They said Godzilla was going to hit 100. And they said X-Men was going to hit 100. So it's always bad to have your movie not do what is predicted by the trades. And the trades have usually, historically speaking, been more accurate. But, as today there's a race for headlines, you see them making these pie-in-the-sky predictions. And it's unfortunate. And if it was such a great number, by the way, you wouldn't see Fox only reporting the worldwide number because they know that their domestic isn't that great. So that's one problem. The second reason is that you have to look at perspective. X-Men came in behind all the other big blockbusters so far of the summer, and they should be building. More and more people should be going to the movies, and particularly with the word of mouth for X-Men, it's the 7th installment. The fact that it couldn't beat all 3 movies to come before it. Again, Captain America, Amazing Spider-Man 2, Godzilla, that it couldn't beat any of them, I think is very damaging. Then also there's the perspective of time. So take a look at X-Men The Last Stand. That came out in 2006, 8 years ago. That film had a higher opening. It opened with 102 million. That's its 3-day number, not its 4-day Memorial Day weekend number. It did about 122, I believe, for the 4 days, and that had no 3D. So it had no inflated ticket prices, either from inflation or from 3D surcharges. And it still did better than this movie. And so that's another problem, that they haven't been able to get back to their original level of moviegoer interest. So that's alarming. And also they were bringing back the original cast. I feel that as much as I like Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy in these roles, I'm beginning to think that maybe they need a bigger box office star here, which is why it's good that Channing Tatum is coming on board. And I honestly feel if I were Fox, I would be like, get me Lupita Nyong'o's number. I want her to be Mohawk Storm. I need that kind of. She fits in with the group in terms of her acting cred. She's an Oscar winner. You've got Fassbender Oscar nominee. You're getting that kind of pedigree with her, and also there's intense interest in her from fans. Lupita Nyong'o is a hot topic. I think especially because she went in that race against Jennifer Lawrence for Best Supporting Actress. I think there's a lot of fan interest and critical interest in Lupita Nyong'o, and I would stick it in that franchise. I would inject it into X-Men Apocalypse, and I think a movie with Channing Tatum and Lupita Nyong'o would be a very exciting possibility. I would think that would be phenomenal. All right, so the other thing is I mentioned inflation. I said X-Men Last Stand, 8 years ago, more successful, and that doesn't even count for inflation. Now, some of you said, well, why aren't we talking about inflation here? Why don't they adjust these numbers for inflation? And I'll tell you why. Nobody in Hollywood wants to have a conversation about how none of their movies can do as well as movies used to do. I think that that's bad publicity for the movie business. It makes all the films not look like they're doing well, and I think it's just not a conversation with the general public that the studios want to have. For instance, if you were to adjust for inflation, the highest movie that came out in the 2000s, in the new century, is at number 14 with Avatar. Avatar, it made so much money, it was ridiculous, and it's still, when you adjust for inflation, only at number 14. I believe these are domestic numbers, but still. Then you have to go all the way to number 27 for The Avengers. Which it was just like, I believe, the 3rd highest grossing movie of all time. We have Titanic in there as well. And so that's just a ridiculous situation for them. They don't want to say, oh, hey, look, isn't this exciting? Our movie's number 32 of all time. Go out and see it. They want to have that record-breaking headline number. And I think they just don't want to play, they don't want to compete with, previous eras in movie making when there was the Great Depression and going to the movies was a really, lifted a lot of people's spirits. I mean, will they ever make a movie that can pull in the kind of money that Gone with the Wind did? Very unlikely. And so I think they just, I think it's a way to salvage their business, both in terms of publicity, and then the bottom line, because it just makes movies look bad. I don't think movies need another reason to have people not go. TV is really taking a big chunk out of, their movie going, interest and their bottom line. And so they're fighting a war to get you into the theater. And the last thing also is budgets. 90 million might seem like a lot of money to you and me, and it is a lot of money just by itself. If it were just a pile of money that you found in the street, you would be ecstatic. But it's not. A ton of money has already been invested in these films. Look at the budget for Spider-Man. Like $250 in terms of what they spent on the movie, and then another $200 million to advertise it. Yes, when you want to advertise a big blockbuster globally, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to do. And so that's why a movie like Neighbors is so much more competitive when it comes in for just $18 million. But X-Men isn't a cheap movie, and you saw how big an ad campaign they ran. That costs money. So they have a responsibility to recoup that money and to make a profit. I mean, Hollywood is a business. So they can't just look at that and go, oh, isn't that nice that we made $90 million? Isn't that wonderful? Look at all that X-Men love. They can't do that. They have to go, oh crap, we have to pay for all, we have to, we spent all this money already. What does this mean for it going forward for the movie? Is that a big enough open that even when we have a slide from the competition and, is that going to keep us going? I mean, of course you have movies that are a surprise hit like Frozen, but that's really an anomaly. I mean, movies don't usually typically perform like that. Not to take anything away from Frozen, that makes Frozen even more unique and special. But nobody can count on having that kind of legs. And nobody really has legs anymore. Back in the day when one movie came out a weekend, if that, you could have a movie that play all summer long. But, there's only so many screens, and there are movies coming in that need multiple screens, and they come in every week, and there's 3 to 4 movies coming out a week. And that's in wide release, not even including all the independents. So you have to get in and get out. Remember, as Jeffrey Katzenberg said, these days a movie makes most of its money in its first 3 weeks. So week 1 is done, and for X-Men, it was low. All right, so that's my response to some of you guys wondering. I hope that paints a better, clearer picture as to what's going on and help you better understand what's going through the mind of the Hollywood executives when they look at the numbers that have come in for their films. All right, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, and anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.